This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
The 40k universe is filled with terrifying aliens and monsters, and since the franchise is actually pretty big, most people are familiar with some of the big ones, such as the terrifying undead alien robots with galaxy-killing weapons known as the necrons, the sadomasochist BDSM elves of the Dark Eldar, or even the voracious tyranid swarm. But the galaxy is a pretty big place, and there's some truly terrifying aliens out there that don't get nearly enough attention, like a race of alien parasites that feed off of religious worship, or a floating brain jellyfish that takes over your head and turns your emotions into a weapon. So today we're going to take a look at 10 super scary and obscure aliens from 40k that you've probably never heard of. Let's get into the grimdark.
In the number 10 spot we have the Khymera. Let's start this list with a creature that literally feeds on nightmares. They're known as the Khymera and resemble large skinless dogs or cats made out of raw muscle and bone. They're like an amalgamation of flesh, teeth, and talons. Their skulls have multiple small black eyes, like that of a spider, and it's said that their bodies glisten as if they're wet, no matter how much illumination there is. They are truly terrifying to look at. The Khymera are vicious predators that hunt by sensing the psychic presence given off by sentient creatures. Often this causes them to have a particular fondness for people with psychic abilities, being drawn to them like sharks to the scent of blood. Whether hunting on instinct or being directed by a malicious entity that has somehow gained power over them, they are absolutely ruthless killing machines, often being tamed and employed by the Dark Eldar as a form of shock unit. Despite their terrifying appearance, these creatures are not actually demons, even though they are technically from the Warp. You see, the Warp is a parallel universe, a realm of emotion, and that includes all of the emotions felt by sentient creatures. The psychic energy left by the emotions of fear and terror leave a particular footprint in the Warp that sometimes a cyst can develop on. As the cyst grows, it will eventually birth a Khymera. As creatures of the Warp, the Khymera do not have a physical form, not really. They tend to drift between the physical universe and the immaterium. In fact, the Khymera are able to phase between the two existences at will. This means that nothing can get in their way when in pursuit of prey. Barricades, locked doors, it doesn't matter. If the Khymera are locked onto you, there is no escaping them. They've even been known to materialize inside of the cockpits of aircrafts, in armored troop transports, or even on the decks of void-borne ships. Now, what's really interesting about them is that through spreading fear and terror during their attacks, the Khymera are subsequently allowing for their continued existence. Not only do they feed on this torment, but their presence will generate new waking nightmares in any survivors. Stories of their attacks will spread across the sector, infecting the minds of other people, which will then in turn generate fear in the Warp for them to spawn on. In the number 9 spot we have the Medusae. The Medusae resemble large floating brains covered in tentacles. Now, other than their truly unsettling appearance, there isn't anything particularly horrifying or dangerous about them off the bat, as a full-grown adult would have no problem fighting them off with a baseball bat. However, the Medusae are far more dangerous than their initial appearance lets on. You see, they are empathetic hunters in that they eat emotions. In order to hunt successfully, they will attempt to attach to a living host, and once in control of their body, they will force the host to experience emotion to ludicrously heightened levels. What's truly terrifying about the Medusae is that by all accounts, it is the ultimate parasite, as unlike other parasitic creatures, it doesn't just feed off of its host, but literally becomes one with them. The Medusae will attempt to attach to the victim, taking over the back of their head and injecting them with many whip-like appendages. Each of these resembles a spinal cord, and once inside the victim's body, the appendages will link with its neural system and begin to take over. Even though they tend to take over the host's body, they mostly leave the minds intact. In fact, the host is still able to experience everything. They maintain their mind and all of their senses. An individual who has been infected by a Medusae becomes incredibly dangerous. It is said that just by meeting their gaze, the creature can cause emotional hemorrhaging within the victim, causing a complete overload of their brains as they're flooded with emotion. When in battle, a Medusae and its host can generate emotion-based psychic powers to wreak havoc on their enemies. They expose their victims to overpowering feelings of anguish and terror. The waves of dread they emanate are so powerful that they can cause humans to collapse into a comatose state. Where these creatures come from is currently unknown, and some suggest that they're not native to this galaxy. Although it is also theorized that, similar to the Khymera, they are a hybrid of matter and emotion from the physical and immaterial universes. The Medusae are frequently spotted alongside the Dark Eldar, and are normally attached to their slaves. And it's not really surprising why, because it's also documented that if you were to eat a Medusae, you would experience all of that stored up emotion inside of the creature. A tidal wave of pain and pleasure, dread and euphoria that will absolutely wreak havoc on your neural system. And since the Dark Eldar are kinda into this, it's probable that they raise them as pets or food, not just as living weapons. In at number 8 we have the Megarachnids. Considering that these things come from a planet known simply as murder, you can kinda guess just how horrifying they are. You see, the Megarachnids were first discovered by the Blood Angels during the Great Crusade. When the planet was first encountered by the Imperium, it was emanating a strange signal from many tree-like growths on the planet's surface. Unfortunately for the Blood Angels, they were not able to make heads or tails out of what the signal was trying to tell them, and thus descended to the planet below. The reality was that these signals were a warning that an incredibly dangerous species known as the Megarachnids had been quarantined here. Megarachnids are spider-like creatures with 8 legs, 4 of which end in long bladed appendages used for combat. The massive strength generated by the creature's body, along with the blade's insane sharpness, meant that they could easily cleave through Space Marine armor as if it was made of wet paper. The species was also hyper-intelligent, and apparently at one point, was capable of space travel. However, the species known as the Interex, who had imprisoned them here, had also stripped them of all of their technology. The Megarachnids came in a variety of different shapes and sizes. Some of them were capable of flight, while others developed biological weapons like the ability to spit acid or cocoon their victims in silk as dense and hard as cement. There were even reports of some of the Megarachnids that were the size of Imperial Titans. They also reproduced so quickly and laid so many eggs that the Blood Angels determined it was a waste of time to attempt to destroy their breeding grounds. A combined force of Blood Angels and Emperor's Children campaigned against the Megarachnids for 6 months. But at the last minute, the species that had originally imprisoned them arrived on the world trying to figure out what was going on. And they actually turned out to be an advanced species of human, which the legions determined was a much more important thing to address, and thus the Megarachnids were saved from extinction as the crusade immediately ended. Whether or not the Megarachnids were able to repopulate is unknown, and they very well might still be out there. Before we dive into the next entry, I have a quick message from this week's sponsor.
It's 2022, and every day more and more businesses are moving online. Nowadays, it's more important than ever to have your own website, but most people don't even really know where to begin when it comes to making one. Squarespace takes the hassle out of website design and makes the entire process simple and fun. And they have hundreds of award-winning templates, so you can get a crisp, clean, professional-looking site up and running in no time at all. But if I'm being honest, there's a lot more to running a website than just having a pretty interface. There's analytics to track, search engine optimization to perform, and honestly, a lot of that can be really overwhelming for a first-time website owner. But thankfully, Squarespace gives its users access to some pretty cool analytic tools, which gives you valuable insight into how your business is growing. Not to mention an entire suite of search engine optimization resources, which will help push your website to the top of online searches. And if you head over to squarespace.com, you can get a free trial, so there's no risk involved. And if you do decide that Squarespace is right for you, then you can use the link squarespace.com/Weshammer and use the code Weshammer at checkout. Then you can get 10% off your first domain or website. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and let's get into the grimdark.
In the number 7 spot, we have the Razorwings. Even though the Razorwings may resemble crows, they're more like a flying pack of piranhas. Every single Razorwing is an incredibly effective hunter. Their sharp beaks and talons, coupled with their incredible flying speed, turns them into vicious predators. It's said that in flight, their flying speed can outpace even the Imperium scout vehicles, at least for a short time. Their claws and beaks are incredibly strong, and are able to cleave through the bones of even large herbivores with relative ease. But this isn't the main weapon that a flock of Razorwings utilize. You see, their names are actually quite literal, in that the feathers of a Razorwing are as sharp as monoblades. This means a Razorwing's entire body is a deadly weapon. When hunting, a flock of Razorwings is often led by a single, much larger individual known as an alpha. It flies ahead of the rest of the flock and is often the first to initiate an attack. After the alpha dives in, the rest of the flock descends upon the victim. Like a storm of razor blades, the swarm of birds rips apart their target incredibly quickly. After their prey is dead, the Razorwings will carve up the carcass and carry the meat and bones to a nearby tree in order to eat. Seeing a tree covered in blood and guts being eaten by a bunch of hellbirds is something I definitely don't need to see, but is also totally metal. Seeing as how the Razorwings seem to have a particular fondness for devouring the bones of their victims, many Imperial scholars believe that the increased level of calcium in their diet is directly used to strengthen and sharpen their feathers into frightening weapons. Razorwings are also quite intelligent and are often able to be tamed by skilled Drukhari beastmasters. Coming in at number 6 is the Unquenched. The Unquenched are basically dehydrated zombie-like creatures from the world of Vaporous. These creatures are cursed with an unquenchable thirst that never ends and worsens every single day, causing them to seek out any form of moisture they can get their hands on, whether that be cans of gasoline or even human blood. There exist no formal reports about these things, and information on them is incredibly scarce. It seems like the only people who know the truth about the Unquenched, that is, what they actually are and where they come from, would be the Priest Kings of Vaporis itself, as they appeared around the same time that the Priest Kings took power. Now, what we as the audience know is that all of the Unquenched begin their lives as normal humans, with some form of psychic ability, but at some point, after drinking the water within their city, a form of corruption takes hold of them. As soon as signs of this corruption are noticed, they are reported to the Priest Kings, and their warriors sweep in to capture them. No one knows exactly what happens during the time period in which they're captured, but there are rumors of dark rituals being conducted by the Priest Kings themselves. After a time, the individual will be taken far from civilization and cast out into the desert. For the rest of their days, they will wander the waste as a feral, ghoulish predator, desperately and frantically searching for any form of liquid they can find. Upon examination, an Unquenched is basically a feral dehydrated zombie. Their body is completely dead, and the psychic energy that once gave them their unique abilities is refocused into keeping the body moving and creating a never-ending unquenchable thirst that drives them to madness. Interestingly enough, they seem to retain their sentience and sometimes even their personalities, although admittedly this is incredibly rare, and their vocal cords are normally the first thing to wither away. The individual who turned into an Unquenched would need to have the ability to communicate psychically in order to talk to a normal person. The more time goes on, the more the Unquenched mind will start to deteriorate, as the never-ending search for water drives them deeper and deeper into madness. There are rumors of Unquenched who are early into their transformation, helping travelers escape the desert, and marking places on their maps to avoid. Most commonly, these are subterranean gathering spots for large groups of Unquenched that have been around for a long time and have become completely deranged, and are now no more than feral undead predators. However, there are also reports of rogue traders that come to Vaporis specifically searching for such places, as these are the areas where the Unquenched will drag their victims to, and are rumored to have incredible hoards of wealth, accumulated from all of the victims that have been drained over the generations in these cave systems. In the number 5 spot, we have the Hrud. The Hrud are one of the most bizarre alien species on this list, and this is because they have the unique ability to manipulate time and use it as a weapon. There have been multiple documented encounters with the Hrud, but many of these reports have different accounts of what they actually look like. Their depictions have ranged from small rat-like creatures that tend to infest dark places, to tall, vaguely humanoid aliens with segmented bodies and large black eyes. This has led to multiple debates on whether or not they're a bunch of different species or one and the same, all collectively known as the Hrud. What is known is that the Hrud emit a distortion field that makes it incredibly difficult for the eyes to focus on them. They could be right in front of you, and despite being directly in your path of vision, they appear like a blurry afterimage. Your brain is trying to tell you that there's something threatening coming for you, but even though you know it's there, you just can't seem to focus on it. What makes the Hrud particularly dangerous is that they emit a passive entropic field all around them that speeds up time. The field gets larger and stronger the more Hrud gather together, and on a large scale, this can cause infrastructure to collapse, crops to wither, and the human population of a world to age incredibly rapidly. When in close proximity to them, the Hrud are able to ramp up the power of these fields to render their opponents old and feeble, and thus unable to defend against their attacks. In one instance, when the Iron Warriors found themselves engaged with the Hrud, a space marine named Antioch was aged 3,000 years. He was still alive after this encounter, but he was definitely a feeble old man. So if anything good was to have come out of this battle, it's that we learned that space marines do age, just super slowly. Coming in at number 4 is the Enslavers. The Enslavers are a parasitic warp creature that resembles a large-toothed jellyfish. They are drawn like hungry predators to the psychic energy generated by all living creatures, but are particularly drawn to those with incredibly potent connections to the warp known as psychers. When their prey is located, the Enslaver will take control of the individual's mind, and will often attempt to twist and contort that person into a literal warp portal. This is an incredibly painful and horrific process, and once complete, the portal will serve as a gateway for more Enslavers, who will use it to enter the physical universe. Not much is known about them, and their records are fragmentary at best. We do know that their first documented sightings was millions of years ago, near the end of a period known as the War in Heaven. This was the largest period of war the galaxy has ever seen, and primarily centered around the necrons and their ancient enemies known as the Old Ones. The Enslavers were able to pour into the universe in their trillions, and the resulting Enslaver Plague, as it was known, is believed to have played a major role in the Old Ones' extinction and the subsequent period where the Necrons abandoned their pursuits and went to sleep within their tomb worlds for 60 million years. There have been reported sightings of Enslavers as recently as M41 by Ordo Malleus of the Imperial Inquisition, so we know they're still out there, but hopefully they remain a rarity. In the number 3 spot, we have the Cranial Leechs. The Cranial Leechs are a voracious grub-like alien parasite that has plagued the Escalon sector for generations. Their exact origins remain unclear, but it is believed by the individuals that live in this sector that they are a form of organic weaponry grown by a malicious, unknown alien species. Tales of cranial leeches attacking humans have existed for a long time, and the reports indicate that the leech will attempt to forcibly burrow under the victim's skin, using its razor-sharp lamprey-like maw to create an entry point, or more commonly and disgustingly, by attacking the victim's eyes or other soft tissue. Once inside the body, the cranial leech will rapidly and hungrily begin to consume anything in its path as it tunnels towards the victim's brain. The process on average takes about 5 minutes to complete, and once the leech reaches the brain, it'll unleash a series of tendrils from its body that connect to the victim's neural tissue. It will then pulse out shockwaves into the flesh that cause an intense feeling of agony, causing the victim to convulse and seize. Once the leech is fully implemented, the convulsions will cease and the individual will become incredibly suggestible as the leech messes with the victim's mind. Whoever the leech's controller is will then be able to manipulate the person into carrying out their bidding. Some reports state that these creatures have been spotted being sold in what is known as the faceless trade, which you can think of as a black market that specializes in alien relics and technology that have been deemed heretical by the Inquisition. And where these individuals are getting those leeches from is, however, still unknown. In the number 2 spot, we have the Nephilim. There are definitely a lot of parasitic and mind-controlling type creatures within the 40k universe, but the Nephilim were probably the most bizarre, in that they didn't feed off emotions like the Medusae, or fear like the Khymera, but they actually fed off of religious adulation. The Nephilim were first encountered on the human world of Malchior. Said to be twice as tall as a space marine and slow-moving, the Nephilim had round torsos and appeared in multiple different colors. It was believed that these colors indicated some type of rank within their society. With no mouths to eat any kind of organic matter, the Nephilim instead fed off the psychic energy generated specifically through religious worship. When they would arrive on a planet, they would greet the human colonists with open arms and preach of their religion and the rewards that awaited in heaven for all that followed in their path. The aliens were said to be incredibly charismatic and were able to influence those around them through a combination of their honeyed words and the ability to psychically manipulate those around them. They would even grant their followers masks made of their own flesh that would latch onto them and further pull them under their thrall. Over the years, those who believed in the Nephilim constructed many cathedrals and places of worship in their honor, fully believing in the sermons the aliens had preached. However, the dark truth about the chapels was that the rapturous psychic energy created by the worship within their walls was like a feeding ground for the Nephilim. They gorged themselves on the beliefs of their flock, draining the life force from the faithful, leaving them as little more than dehydrated and desecrated husks. After a world's population had been fully drained, they would move on to a new world and begin the process again. Now thankfully the Nephilim are believed to be extinct, as their homeworld was eventually found by the White Scars Legion and subsequently exterminatus. However, we don't really know how many worlds they actually spread to, so there's no way of knowing if they were completely wiped out or not. And in the number 1 spot, we have the Slaugth. The Slaugth are known as one of the most terrifying and horrific alien races that continue to plague the Imperium. It is said that they are responsible for the disappearance of entire populations of countless cities or even entire worlds. They go by many names, including the Maggot Men, the Dream Eaters, or the Carrion Masters, and due to a lack of information on them, most don't even believe they exist. However, there are multiple records within the Inquisition's possession that confirm the terrifying alien species is all too real. Each individual Slaugth appears as a giant mound of sentient wriggling maggots that writhe together in a vaguely humanoid shape, and are almost completely impervious to all forms of damage that don't completely obliterate them. Their technology is also seemingly incredibly advanced, so much so that it is often mistaken as sorcery. They're capable of constructing insanely powerful and esoteric weapons, and a wide array of horrifying constructs that blend the organic with the inorganic. The Slaugth are nomadic in nature and don't seem to have a homeworld, at least not one documented by the Imperium. Their fleets travel around the galaxy and they act like raiders and pirates. They'll descend upon unsuspecting worlds and creep through the dead of night to abduct their victims. Their abductions start off small, snatching 1 or 2 people off the street, but over time, more and more people will start to disappear quicker and quicker. The fear and confusion these abductions spread with seemingly no cause can cause a world's population to descend into anarchy and civil war, all directly according to the Slaugth's plans, who pull on the heartstrings of a planet from the shadows. They are hyper-intelligent and fully capable of space travel, but they don't seem to be interested in expanding their empire or taking any new territory. So thankfully they remain few in number, choosing instead to strike from the shadows on worlds across the galaxy. What their ultimate goals are still remain a mystery. However, over the last several centuries, the number of documented sightings of the Slaugth has begun to increase exponentially, signaling the alarm bells within the Inquisition. And there we go, that's 10 super creepy aliens from the 40k universe that you probably didn't know too much about. Which one of the ones on this list do you think is the scariest and why? Are you more afraid of the Khymera, who there's absolutely no getting away from? Or does having your brain be devoured by leeches just completely gross you out? Also, if there's any other 40k monsters that you think deserve to be on this list that I didn't mention, let me know about them down in the comments. I tend to learn more from my comment section about 40k than pretty much any other source, and I love hanging out and talking with you guys down there. Thanks again to my patrons for supporting this channel and helping me make new videos. And if you'd like to help out the channel and get your name listed at the end of my videos, my Patreon is linked down in the description. Thanks again everybody, and until next time, happy wargaming.